What's up guys, my name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, we've got some custom tactics and player instructions for one of the best all-round balanced formations in FIFA 23, the 4-2-3-1 narrow. It's team of the season, so if you guys need any coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics, I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that it is the narrow variation of the formation. It's the first one, not the second one. I still see some people get confused by that, so I just wanted to clear that up. It's the one with the 3 cams, not the left mid and the right mid. So starting off with the tactics guys, for the defensive style I like to have this on balance. This is because it gives you the greatest control over your defense, where when you need to press you can press, and then when you want to drop off, be a little bit more passive, you're also able to do that. So balance does give you the very much needed control that is not possible with the other settings. Now moving on to the defensive width guys, I like to have this on about 40. It's not something you have to specifically use, but the reason I have it on 40 is so we can primarily defend in a nice narrow and compact shape. This means we block all the attacks through the middle primarily, but at the same time we've still got a bit of natural width to cover the wider areas in case an opponent tries to go down the wing. This is the main reason I don't have my width super low, otherwise we're not going to be able to reach the wings properly. Now moving on to the depth guys, I like to have this on about 60 at the moment. This is so the defensive line isn't so deep to the point where we're always getting pinned back and we're under constant pressure, but at the same time the defensive line isn't too high to the point where one through ball will completely rip us to shreds. So I like to go for something in the middle ground. I like to have this on 60. It just works really well for me. You guys can change that if you like. Now moving on to build up play guys, I like to have this on balanced. This is because it's the most controlled, the most varied, and you get the most out of it. What I mean by this is with balance you can play quickly, slowly, mixture of both. You can do whatever you want. If you use something like slow build up, you're always restricted to playing slowly. If you play fast build up, you're always restricted to playing quickly. Basically balance just gives you a much more varied attack, a much more varied build up, which is super useful and underrated. Now moving on to chance creation guys, I like to have this on direct passing. This is because it's the most meta option you can use. Basically your attacking players will bunch up against the defenders, so you can do the really overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. It's super important in this game and this tactic is the best at it. Your players also make extra movements in the box so you can get off that extra pass to guarantee the goals. It's super important to use direct passing in my opinion. Now moving on to the attacking width guys, there's no specific number you need to use for this, but I'm using this on 49 because it's one below 50, so it's kind of technically more narrow than it is wide, if you get what I mean. It's kind of like a psychological thing, but the reason I do this is because I don't want the width too high to the point where it feels like a wide formation, because if I wanted to do that I would just use the wider formation, you know, the wider variation of the 4-2-3-1, but on the flip side I don't want the width to be like super low either, otherwise it feels like your players are almost sat on top of each other. So don't ask why, but 49 is just a number that I settled on and it works fine just for me. Now moving on to players in box guys, I like to have this on about 6. This is so we can get some players into the box to create chances of course, but we don't overcommit the entire team to the point where we're always getting counter-attacked and leaking goals. Again, you can change this if you want, but 6 works quite well. I go between like 5 and 6, doesn't really matter to be honest. As for corners and free kicks, I have these both on 1 because there is a corner kick routine that I use which requires these to be on 1. Link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen. Now moving on to the plays you want to use guys in the striker position, because this is a one striker formation, I think it's important that you use a nice well-rounded striker, because where you can get the balance between 2 players in a 2 striker formation, for example, where you could have like one creative player and then like a Haaland next to him for example, you have to get that all in one player in a 1 striker formation. So it's important you use a striker that can do a bit of everything, otherwise you're going to be very limited in attack and you're always going to be forced to play a certain way. So get a striker that can do a bit of everything, shoot on either foot, decent dribbling, decent passing, basically somebody that can do everything, as it really does help you out in this formation. Now moving on to the left cam and the right cam, you're going to want to use like good winger style players. These are players that obviously have really good pace, really good dribbling, the skill moves, crossing and shooting ability, basically really good all-round attacking game. You're not going to want to use slow clunky players that have no creativity creative ability, otherwise you might struggle, because these are like the main outlets in the team, and it's important that you use competent players here. Now moving on to the central cam, I suggest using a nice technical player, somebody that has good creative ability. Basically use somebody that you feel comfortable with in this position. There's not an exact criteria you need, but you do need somebody that has creative ability, as these are like the main playmaker in the 4-2-3-1. So just make sure you are using a competent cam, somebody that is nice and agile, maybe somebody that has good shooting and passing, but yeah, just ensure the cam is good for your own sake. Now moving on to the right CDM, I like to go for a more defensive minded player. This is somebody that's going to stay back, break up the play, and really add defensive security. You're going to want somebody with a medium high work rate if you can get it, as you get the maximum contribution in defense and they're not too bothered about going forward. So ensure that this player is nice and defensively sound, as you do need one of those in the midfield. Now moving on to the left CDM, I like to go for a more box-to-box style player. This is somebody that's going to attack and defend and have a bit of a free role in the team. So you're going to want somebody with a high work rate if you can get it. Not an absolute necessity, but it's just something you can aim for. But just ensure that this player is like a really good all-round card, so they can do a bit of everything. Moving on to the left back, I like to use a more attacking fullback. This is somebody that's going to go forward and contribute on the attack for me. So I like to use Roberto Carlos, as he's got that really good left foot. And then in the right back position, I kind of just use Trippier. He's really just going to stay back for me. So I have like one fullback that I intend to send forward and one that I intend to just have stay back. That's just something I like to do. And as for the centre backs, these just need to be the meta players, the fast players, the ones that have really good physicality, and the medium high work rates. As for the goalkeeper, yeah, just use whoever you need to for chem, really, because all goalkeepers are pretty much trash in FIFA 23. Now moving on to the player instructions, guys. On the striker, I like to have him on stay central and mixed attack. We have him on stay central because it's important that he stays in the central areas. We don't want him drifting out wide, especially since he is our only striker. We need him to be in the middle. We need him to be in the central areas. We also have him on mixed attack as opposed to getting behind, as I feel like you get a lot more out of the player this way. If you put him on getting behind, he's very restricted to just making the same one-dimensional runs, and you're limited to things like through balls all the time. If you have him on mixed attack, he can get more involved in the build-up, and you just have a much better time attacking as a whole, in my opinion. Now moving on to the central cam, I just have him on get into the box across. You guys might not even want to put him on that. Sometimes you might want him to sit a little bit outside the box in case the ball gets deflected out, and some people just want him to like always get into the box. I just have him on get into the box across, as I noticed they can be a little bit static if you have them on balanced crossing runs, so it's kind of like a preference thing. You guys can choose if you want. Now moving on to the right cam and the left cam, I do have both of these on get into the box across. The reason for this is if you have them on balanced crossing runs, these players in particular are very hesitant to actually attack and get into the penalty box. If you put them on get into the box across, it just means they will always make the transitional runs to get more involved and get into the penalty area. Some people get confused and think you just have to use this to cross, but obviously that's not the case. You can just play a short pass if you want to, but yeah, it just means that they're going to make the runs. Super important in my opinion. Now moving on to the right CDM, the more defensive minded player, we have him on stay back while attacking, cut passing lanes and cover centre. Stay back, very self-explanatory, he's defensive, so we don't want him going forward. Cut passing lanes means he's always going to be looking to break up the play and annoy your opponent, which is always a good thing. And then we have him on cover centre, so he does defend all the attacks through the middle, which is super important. Now moving on to the left CDM, the more box-to-box style player, we have him on balanced attack and cover centre. Default settings basically and cover centre. The default settings are there because we don't really want to restrict him. He is a box-to-box player, he has a bit of a free roll, so we kind of just let him do his own thing. The only important thing is that he covers the central areas and blocks the attacks through the middle. But yeah, moving on to the left back, my more attacking minded fullback, we have him on balanced attack and overlap. We have him on balanced attack and overlap, so we can be there to add extra width to the team. The 4-2-3-1, although it's one of the more wider narrow formations, if that makes sense, still lacks a bit of width at times. So sometimes you want to have that wider option when you're going forward. So having one of the fullbacks on balanced attack and overlap means you're always going to have a wider option when you're attacking. Super useful to have it in my opinion. Now moving on to the right back, I have him on stay back while attacking and overlap. We have him on stay back, so we always have at least 3 defenders back at a time, and then we have him on the overlap run type because in case I press L1 or trigger a run forward with him, he's going to make the overlapping runs to add extra width as opposed to running narrow. As for the centre backs and the goalkeeper, these are on default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-2-3-1. If you have enjoyed, please be sure to course, drop this a thumbs up, sub to the channel if you are new, and don't forget to turn on notifications. And with all that aside, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.